I want to bring in now former Secretary of Defense and former Director of the CIA, Leon Panetta. Secretary, back in 2018, you told our sister network CNBC that if Iran restored its nuclear program, a military response could be the only option. So Israel's just taken that step. So what now, militarily and for future negotiations?
Well, the fundamental issue here is whether or not ultimately Israel can be successful at destroying their nuclear capability and their nuclear enrichment capability. And that's the question. That is obviously the principal target. They've been able to degrade Iran. They've gone after their military commanders. They've gone after their nuclear scientists. But the issue is, and it's something that I'm familiar with and others who dealt with this issue are familiar with, it's very difficult to go after their enrichment facilities and their nuclear facilities because those are really tough targets to get at. So the question mark here is, yes, they're now hitting Iran, but are they able to truly go after their nuclear enrichment capability?
I think that is such a key question here, but I think there's also an emerging pattern that could have big implications for the future of warfare, because we saw two Israeli security officials tell the Associated Press that Mossad smuggled explosive drones into Iran ahead of this attack and placed them near military sites. We saw Ukraine do something similar in Russia just a few weeks ago. You were the head of the CIA, of course. What kind of intelligence goes into an operation like this, and what does it tell you about how wars are fought now and in the future?
Well, we are seeing the future. There's no question about it between what happened with Ukraine and Russia and now what Israel's doing to Iran. It demands a great deal of intelligence. You've got to be able to have individuals that are there, that know where the targets are, that can identify where those targets are. And you've also got to be able to then smuggle drones into these countries, so that you can then activate those drones to go after targets. That's the war of the future, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it in spades right now with what Israel's trying to do in Iran, and obviously what Ukraine is trying to do in Russia. But again, the fundamental issue is, with every attack, with every military attack, with every war, what is the ultimate strategy here? What are you trying to achieve as a mission? Or are you just rolling the dice?
Yeah, and it's been clear in the way that Israel is talking, at least about this latest wave of strikes, that their goal here is to decapitate the nuclear program within Iran. You present the issues and why there are barriers potentially to that. But the other side of this equation is the role of the United States. You've been in the Situation Room countless times. I wonder if you can give us a sense of the kinds of information that the president could be receiving during, after an attack like this, and also the conversations taking place behind the scenes to make sure that the U.S. isn't drawn further into this fight.
Well, when I was Secretary of Defense, Netanyahu threatened to attack, as he has done, on Iran. And President Obama was very concerned about that. I met with the defense minister of Israel, Barak, and I indicated to him that while they could attack Iran, they could not really be successful at going after their nuclear capability. They just didn't have the weapons to be able to penetrate. We did. The United States did. And so it was much better to work with the United States in trying to make sure that Iran does not achieve a nuclear weapon. And eventually, Netanyahu backed off and did not take that strike. They've now done that. So the question now is what is the United States trying to do in order to try to advance some kind of peaceful solution here? President Trump obviously was negotiating with Iran. They weren't making very good progress. Now, with the war having broken out, with these attacks that have taken place, I think the chances for negotiations have pretty much collapsed. So how does the United States now pick up the pieces and try to get the players back to the negotiating table? I think that is going to be a very difficult task.
Yeah, and those are certainly the key questions that we'll be asking of top officials within the White House as the hours and days progress here. For now, former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, thank you for your time this Friday.